Are China and India preparing for the collapse of Russia's oil infrastructure? Right now, the price of oil is $65 a barrel. That's really bad for major oil producing economies like Russia, the United States, and Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia just increased production by another 500,000 barrels a day. And by September, they'll up it by 2 million? It's not just Saudi Arabia, it's all of OPEC. They are increasing oil production, even though it's less profitable for them to do this. Why? Because, in my opinion, Saudi Arabia has finally agreed to help the United States crush the Russian economy, and the only way to really do that is by going after their oil production. Take a look at Russia's export pool of $394 billion, and you can see almost $200 billion, over half of Russia's exports are petroleum based. The more oil that Saudi Arabia and OPEC put out there into the supply drives down the price of oil, and it harms Russia's exports. It harms their ability to fund the Ukraine war. But the huge setback for Saudi Arabia and the United States is that India and China are Russia's top oil purchasers. They contribute to about $190 to $200 billion of oil exchange every year. And the cheaper Russian oil gets, the more China and India will buy it, even though they're not using it. They're literally just storing it at this point. Now, this was mentioned by my eternal dance rival on TikTok, Mr. Global, and I've mentioned his post in the caption. You should totally watch it. And these vast purchases of Russian oil offend both Saudi Arabia and the United States, because the Saudis used to be India and Russia's #1 oil exporter until Russia took that spot. And of course, it makes the United States angry because we are trying to keep Russia poor, but India and China don't care. Or do they? We are all seeing this wild theater of tariffing India and China for a bunch of reasons, most importantly because of their support for Russia in this war. But what if, for now, at least for the past few months, that's just been theater? Ukraine has been given the go-ahead to launch massive long-range strikes all over the entirety of Russia, and they've been doing it. Ukraine has successfully launched wave after wave of strikes deep into Russia against critical infrastructure and also even their elite teams, for good reason. Ukraine has been conducting these operations and preparing for them for over a year, and I don't think they're anywhere near done. In fact, I think the next strike is going to be against Russia's oil industry, like the attack we just saw in Sochi. For the past year, whenever Ukraine would successfully attack a Russian oil refinery or other oil depots, they would get a lot of criticism from the West. We would see the price of oil go up, and then Ukraine would have to relent. But what if they don't need to do that anymore? When Ukraine initially launched these attacks against Russia's energy infrastructure, Saudi Arabia and OPEC didn't have a lot of oil in production. China and India did not get their fill of stored Russian oil just in case. And maybe, just maybe, the United States did not have the infrastructure they wanted in place in case there was a huge oil supply shock. Now, this is a what if, but keep the tinfoil hat on with me. Ukraine struck that oil depot in Sochi and there was no criticism. It was kind of like an all clear has been given. India is always going to be much more friendly with the United States than they are with China, because China keeps trying to take Indian land. They also want to start damming the water to control India's oil supply. Let's hope that never happens. So India will always keep a weary eye against their eastern neighbor. And maybe threatening India, one of our key partners and buffers against China, with insane tariffs that could actually hurt their economy, maybe that's just for show. And China isn't stupid. If they see that Russia's time has come and maybe they can't be China's gas station anymore, then China will buy as much of these cheap goods as they could possibly get, despite whatever America tells them. Because now, if Ukraine manages to successfully attack and even destroy key Russian energy infrastructure, if they start destroying pipelines, if they start destroying more depots, more refineries, then you will see a huge drop in the availability of Russian oil. And that generally will lead to a huge spike in the price. Now look at Saudi Arabia's oil production. It shot from about 9 million barrels a day to 9.36. OPEC has contributed another, 200,000, maybe 500,000. But Saudi Arabia alone could produce 3 million more barrels if they had to, as we saw right before 2020 when they were producing 12 million barrels a day. And then look at the crude production of the United States. It is higher than any other country's production has ever been. We are at 13.5 million barrels, even though the price of oil is so cheap. Usually, when oil gets too cheap, we stop production, but we haven't done that. So even if Russian oil production does start plummeting to 8 million barrels a day, or 6 million barrels a day, or 5, it looks like, most likely, OPEC and the United States and other major oil producing nations will be able to fulfill that deficit quickly. The United States will make a ton of money because their oil will be more in demand. Saudi Arabia will get India and China back as their top oil traders. Okay, it's win-win for the West at least. And since China and India will have their oil stores filled to the brim, they'll be able to handle a quick supply shock due to the Russian oil no longer being so freely available. Remember that China and India feel no love for Russia. They have a friendship with them out of necessity. As soon as Russia is no longer necessary, then they're not even a concern. Am I 100% sure that this is the case? Not at all. But I do know for a fact that whatever the government wants us to see isn't even 20% of the picture. I am the Geo Husar, and this could be what ends the war. Thanks for watching.